Hello and welcome to Tabletop Talk. I'm your host, Chris, and this is the story of the tragedy of the Melon Merchant. Now, this comes from the first campaign that I DM'd. Um, Bit of background. Um, it was me and then four other players. Um, those players were my sister and three of her friends. And those four sort of made up the core group of our gaming group for several years. Um, and I'll sort of I don't know how they feel about being referred to on YouTube. I'll sort of refer to them by their race and class. So my sister was playing a human bard. One of the players was a dwarven cleric. Another player was a dwarven paladin. Uh, they were not related, nor did they know each other. And the fourth player was a human ranger. Now, at this point, we had been playing the game for a while, um, for a couple months or so. I don't know, and and so they were going to school at the time. Um, my my group, they were going to high school. I was in high school too, and they they I was in high school too, but they were in a younger class than I was. Um, and they were sort of telling this other guy that they knew about what had been going on in the game. He seemed interested, this other guy. And he wanted to join the group. And so it was brought to me, the dungeon master. They were like, "Hey, can this other guy join the group?" And I was like, "Sure, why not?" And this is the story of what happened when he joined the group. Um, it's it's a strange thing. One of the sad sort of realities of D&D, or I suppose any sort of social gathering in general, is that you're going to have people that just don't, for whatever reason, they don't click. Their personalities don't match. And that was me and this guy. We just we were on completely different wavelengths, and so I was not I don't it's a harsh thing to say that you just did not like someone, but I did not like this guy. Now, at the time when this happened, I had yet to make that deduction. We hadn't really met, and this was just the first time we had even talked to each other was when we were playing the game where he got introduced. I learned through subsequent uh, just talking to him and playing with him that I figured out that I didn't like him. But that's beside the point. Um, this how what happens when he gets introduced in the game. So the up to this point in the game, and I might make a video sort of about this campaign in the future. I don't know. I like this campaign. It was the most successful campaign we played. Um, but up to this point in the game, the players were in the city, and the whole sort of point was that there was this evil guy who had come from one of the players' backstories, and he had taken over the underground of the city, the criminal underbelly, if you will, and he was sort of making the sort of criminal underbelly rise up, and they were sort of attacking shops, and basically they're trying to take over the mercantile system of the city, um, and the players were trying to stop it. So they had been doing stuff like that up to this point. And so when this other guy wants to come in, his character. I think he was definitely a rogue. I know he was a rogue. I can't remember whether he was a human or an elf. Maybe he was a half elf. I can't remember. He was either a human or an elf. It wasn't anything other than one of those two. But he was definitely a rogue. Um, and the party didn't have a rogue at this particular moment in time. They'd had one, but he died in one of the earlier sessions. Um, so he was a rogue. So my idea to bring him into the game was he was, a part of the criminal underbelly of the city, but he didn't like what the big bad guy was doing. So he, tried to stand up to him, and he got sort of cast out. Um, the big bad guy was like gonna try to execute him, and he had some of his minions go out to execute him, but he sort of the rogue character um, fought back and ran away, and that was sort of when the party found him. He was running through the city, and he was being chased by these guys, and so there's this fight, and then at the end of the fight they had this guy, this rogue, and they were like, "What are you doing?" And he was like, "Oh, there's these guys were chasing me, or whatever." And so then he became one of the party, because when you it's always hard when you're trying to introduce someone into the party when the game's been going on for a while. You really have it's never really going to be totally satisfactory what you do. You just gotta kind of go with it, because you want this. If it needs to be perfectly narratively sort of succinct and perfect, it's not going to happen. This guy wants to play. The players want him to play, so you just got to move heaven and earth to make him play. That's just what you got to do as a DM. Um, so he gets accepted into the group, so they go off. And now, so this is what happened. I want to. Okay, I'll just. So here's what happened. Um, they go into the city, and they go to the marketplace. There's a sort of the city has a bunch of districts. I had like a big map, and there was a big market district, and so they go to the market district because they want to buy stuff. Everyone wants to buy stuff in D&D. Um, so they go to the market district, and the rogue decides that he wants to go steal something because he's a rogue, and I don't fault him for that because this was his first game of D&D. He hadn't played before. I mean, none of the other players, including me, had played before, but before we started. But we'd been playing for a couple months. So when you're playing for a couple of months, as long as you keep doing it, you're basically a pro at that point. There's nothing really to worry about. But this guy never played before, so he just wanted to play some D&D. So he played a rogue, so he just wanted to go off and like pickpocket some people and steal stuff. That's fine. I don't fault him for that. Um, so what happened? So he he doesn't go off and do it on his own. No, 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 no. He like gathers the party together in a huddle, and he's like, "Hey guys, I want to go off and steal some stuff." And so the rest of the party's like, "All right, man, whatever you want to do." And and so my sister, the bard, she, who by the way, my sister, the bard's character had a suit of glamored armor that she stole from a succubus. Story for another time. So she was like, "All right, dude, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna get my loot, or maybe she's like, I'm gonna get my loot and I'm gonna play some music and I'm gonna distract the people in the marketplace so you can go off and pick their pockets." And maybe she played her lute, maybe not. That bard character had a lute that she played, but she was more into dancing. And so, because like in this game was played in 3.5 D&D. It wasn't the newest edition at the time. At the time, the newest edition was 4th edition, but we decided to play 3.5 D&D because there was a complete online SRD guide, and so that just made it easier. So we were playing. I still had the books, but it was on. Everyone else could look up stuff online, and I looked up stuff online too. It was just easier. So we were playing 3.5 D&D, and in 3.5 D&D, they had a whole bunch of different performance skills that you could have, and you could get trained in as many variations of them as you wanted. And so my sister's bard she had performance in the loot, but she had more points in like performance dancing. So I can't remember if she played the lute or if she danced. Maybe she did both. It's possible. But she did something to sort of distract the people, and she rolled her performance, and she rolled pretty well. So I'm like, okay, yeah, all the people in the market place sort of start to gather around you, and then you listen to you or watch you dance or whatever. And so they all gather around, and so they're all focused on her, and so the rogue is like, all right, it's time to work. So he goes off and he starts looking. He's like, I'm looking for pockets to pick. And so I'm like, all right, make a perception check. In 3.5 D&D, it wasn't a perception check. It was a spot check. It was what it was called back then. So I'm like, roll a spot check. So he rolls his spot check, and he's like, all right, yeah, you see, this guy has got a coin purse, and there's a coin purse on this guy, or whatever. So he's going around and he's rolling his sleight of hand or pickpocket or whatever the fuck skill it was, and he's grabbing stuff. He's rolling pretty well. He's grabbing stuff, and it's like, all right, that's you're doing good. You're grabbing all this stuff. You've got like, a couple. You got like 10 goals worth of stuff or whatever. I don't remember what I said. That seems reasonable. So he's going stuff, but he's not done yet. He's waiting for that one big score. He thinks he's gonna find one big score. So he's like so he's got all the stuff, and he asked me. He's like, "Are there any stalls around?" And I'm like, yeah. There's make a spot check again. So because you always want to have your players just roll stuff just for the hell of it. So roll a spot check. So he rolls his check, and he gets a number, and I'm like, yeah, there's a stall over there. It looks like there's a guy. He's behind his stall. He's still at his stall, but he's looking over. He's watching the bard's performance, and the guy's like, What's the stall sell? And I'm like, it sells melons. I just made that. It sells melons. And so he's like, I don't want to steal melons. He's like, does the guy have a coin purse? And I'm like, yeah, he's got a coin purse. So he's like, okay, I'm going to sneak around the stall and I'm going to steal his purse. And I say, okay, roll your stealth. It wasn't, okay, it's in 3.5 edition D&D is really weird. There wasn't perception, there was spot, and there wasn't stealth. Stealth was two skills. Stealth was move silently, and hide were the two skills. And so, in later editions, they just umbrellaed it into one thing, which is stealth, which is just better. But so I'm like, all right, roll your move silent and your hide or whatever. Maybe he rolled both. I'm not sure. Maybe he just. No, probably I just had him roll move silently because the guy, the melon merchant, wasn't actually looking at him. He was watching the performance. So I'm like, roll your move silent. He rolls his move silent, rolls pretty well. He sneaks up, and he goes. He's like, all right, I'm gonna pick his pocket. So he reaches out, he rolls his pickpocket. The almighty one gets rolled. And so I'm like, ooh, okay. So you try to pick his pocket. You get too eager, and you sort of bump his leg. And he looks down. He's like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And so now there's a problem. This melon merchant, he's caught him in the act of picking his pocket, and he's shouted at him. He's accosted him. And so the people are starting to turn around. There's some guards coming up. They got their halberds, and they're like, "What's all that noise over there?" And so now the rogue has got a choice. What does he do? How does he react? What do? He says, "I push the cart over." Why would you do that? So he pushes the cart over, and all the I say, so you push the cart over, all the melons go falling on the ground, they splatter, and it's a big mess. And the melon merchant goes, "My melons, no," because I figure this guy has grown these melons, conceivably, and he's come to the market in his stall to sell them so he can live to buy things to live. And here's this asshole that has just not only tried to steal his money, but when he's failed to do that, he pushes over the cart and destroys like a whole season's worth of work, conceivably. So this guy's gonna face the winter with like nothing. And so I'm like, this guy is fucking livid, and he like tries to strangle the fucking rogue. I feel like that was a justified response for the melon merchant. And so so now the rogue has got another choice. What does he do in response to this merchant trying to strangle him? His response: stab the fucking merchant. Again, it was this guy's first game of D&D. So I can understand the sort of weird, strange, uh, the weird sort of things that happen. Um, he's being forced to make decisions. I'm forcing him to make these decisions really quickly, and so he panics and he stabs him. He's got a dagger or a short sword or a rapier, whatever he had. He stabs him. So I'm like, okay, roll an attack. He rolls his attack. He rolls well. He couldn't have rolled this well on the pickpocket check, but he rolls well on the stab. So I'm like, okay, you stab the melon merchant, and he didn't have any hit. Like, he was just an NPC I'd made up. He didn't have any stats. And so I'm like, okay, he's fucking down. He's unconscious. And so and so the cards run up, and then they grab him, and at this point the party's like, oh, you know, they're trying to figure out if they should go stand up for this guy or to just let him get taken away. And um, they, I think, I don't remember what they do. I think they just let him get taken away, actually, which is pretty funny. But he gets taken away. Someone, revives the fucking melon merchant, and they go off to the uh, the the castle or the hall, the city hall or whatever, where the lord of the city lives, and the city guard, um, because they had talked with the lord of the city a couple of times, and he had sort of given them official leave to sort of act above the city guard as they deem necessary. And they'd also worked with the captain of the city guard a bunch of times on doing stuff. Um, they had this rogue motherfucker had no such writ on him, so he gets his ass all to the dungeons. And so he's in the dungeons, and then the party, they come in and they're like, "Yeah, guys, he's with us. Can we get him out of the dungeon?" And then the city guards, he's like, he can get out of the dungeon if you pay 500 gold. And then, and then the rogue, the player who played the rogue character, he got really upset at that. He was like, "What? 500 gold? He didn't have 500 gold." He was like, "500 gold? You want me to pay 500 gold?" And I'm like, "Yeah. You picked a bunch of pockets. You tried to pick this guy's pocket. He caught you. You pushed his cart over, destroyed his merchandise, and then stabbed him. So 500 gold seems like an easy fine, And so, but he didn't have 500 gold. So the party sort of pooled their funds together amongst themselves. They scraped together 500 gold, and they gave it to the guard captain. He was like, "All right, this guy, get him out of my sight. I don't want to see him again." And he's like, I made him say something sort of judgmental. I was like, "All the things that are going on in the city right now, and this is what you give to me." And he's like, shakes his head and he like walks away. And I mean, at the time, I wasn't sort of that upset about it. I was sort of more going with the flow. It was kind of funny. Um, but it was something this guard captain would have said. But yeah, I was just going with it. I thought it was kind of funny, but at the same time, I did sort of want to, it was funny. We were laughing, but I wanted, to suggest to the new player that, maybe this isn't how you should be doing it. You know what I mean? Like, you can go off and like pickpockets, but know that if you get caught, there's going to be consequences because, it's not like you're playing Skyrim or something where if you try to pick a pocket and they catch you, you can just reload the save. This is sort of a role playing game, sort of simulating real life in a fantasy setting. And so if you break the law, there's going to be consequences. So I was just, trying to hint to this guy that, maybe you should be a little more careful going forward. Um, so yeah, that's the tragedy of the melon merchant. We sort of that it sort of became a running joke in the group, the tragedy of the melon merchant, and yeah, that was that player. Um, I suppose in a sense it's fitting that that happened on his first uh, game because he sort of continued to sort of push to toe the line between sort of, fun role playing and sort of, disruptive behavior, as it were. And that was eventually because he eventually got, kicked out of the group. Um, he was one of the few people we kicked out of the group. Um, and it was because, at that point I had sort of figured out that I didn't like him. But it wasn't. I wasn't gonna be in like an authoritarian dictator about it just because I didn't like him. I wasn't just gonna kick him out of the group just because of that. But I mean, the other players sort of kind of had enough of him. He was being disruptive, and he was, he wasn't exactly being what you would call a team player a lot of the time. So it's just funny that that should happen on his first game because it was sort of a a taste of what was to come, if you would. But stuff like that happens in D&D all the time. You meet all kinds of people. You all kinds of things happen, and it's fun to talk about it. And that's what this was. That was the story, the tragedy of the Melon Merchant. Hope you enjoyed.